The joys of being a senior. You're in the last year of the best or worst 4 years of your life. You're objectively the coolest kid in school. And yes, you get to experience the infamous process that is college admissions. Now last year, I was a mess going through the college process, but today I'm going to turn my mistakes into happy ones by sharing with you the mistakes I made so you don't make them too. I'm not sure if that's how Bob Ross intended to use that phrase, but we're just going to be rolling with it. Hi, my name is Shruti and welcome if you're new here. I hope you're all doing well. To give a little background, I am a freshman at the University of Southern California studying neuroscience and on the pre-med track. Today, we're going to be talking about the 10 most important steps in applying to college. I want this video to serve as a resource for you guys, so as you're going through the process, if you ever forget anything, you can come back to this video, search around for what you need, and then be like, oh, that's what she said. Okay, moving on. Anyways, grab a snack as well as a pen and paper because you're going to want to take notes. First, let's talk about grades, GPA, standardized tests, and the common data set. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I'm not sure how much they're going to be weighted this year, and this is all determined by past due, but there are a few important things I wanted to note. If you're interested in gauging the odds of your chance of getting into a school based on your test scores in GPA, you can search up the common data set for the school you're interested in. With the common data set, you can see what percent of the accepted students has a certain score. You can compare the scores you have to the percentage of students accepted with them as a way to sort of gauge your ability to get into the school, but I will say this isn't the most practical way. If you're interested, this is just a way you can do it. Now you may be wondering, Shruti, what is a good test score? How do I know whether or not to send it in? Well, for your SAT and ACT, just send the best one that you have. These ones, you have to send them in for most schools. Actually, this year, I think there is an exception for some schools. Just make sure to look into that. Also, remember, you can super score your tests for most schools. SAT is super scored for almost every single school, and then ACT is super scored for some schools. So make sure you look into that before choosing which one to send if you've taken both. For SAT subject tests, a good score is about 750 to 800, but for the more technical subjects like chemistry, physics, math 1, and math 2, usually a good score is between 790 or 780 and 800 because they're really competitive and they're math-based, so most students do really well on these. SAT subject tests aren't always required, so if your score is lower, I recommend against sending these in because they can actually harm you more than help you, but if you do have a really good score on these, I highly recommend you send them because they are a way to stand out from the rest of the application pool. And it's another standardized way for the school to gauge your strength and competency in a certain subject. And lastly, for AP scores, I think 4 and 5s are really good to send. If you have a 3 and the school uses that as credit towards a class, I recommend waiting until you're accepted into the school to then send that score to get out of that class. Lastly, you might be wondering whether or not to send those scores. For most schools, the SAT and the ACT are required. Again, this year there may be some differences because of the current situation. As for SAT subject tests, I'm pretty sure most schools don't require them, but they are preferred or optional. Usually if it's labeled optional, the school would love to see it, but again, with the given circumstances, they're not entirely necessary. And then for AP scores, I think AP scores are highly underrated, and I didn't even realize how underrated they were, but schools seem to really like these. So if you guys did take AP classes, you did well on your AP tests, I highly recommend you send them. Also, an important note, you don't actually have to pay to send your scores to the school. Most schools say that you can just report them in the different application portals, which we'll go over later, and then only after you get accepted into the school, you'll have to pay to send them. And this is so important because you can save so much money, and I can promise you, once you're a college student, you're gonna wish you had extra pocket cash all the time. Let's talk about recommendation letters, when to ask, and how to get the best one. My first advice is to ask your recommendation letter writers to write your letters of recommendation as early as possible. The more time you give them, the more time they're going to have to write a better letter. And also keep in mind, these teachers probably have to write a bunch of letters for a bunch of people, so the earlier you are on their list of students to write for, you'll probably get a more unique and a well-written essay as opposed to others who are down the line who at some point the teacher will just get tired and start reusing different words and phrases and ideas, which you don't want to happen to you. Now you might be wondering, how do you get a really good recommendation letter? Well, there are so many different ways to do this. The most important thing is to pick a teacher that you know likes you. This is the surefire. This is a really solid way to make sure that you get a teacher who writes really well about you. And there's also a few additional things that you can do when you're emailing them. So when you send them the email, you can remind them what classes you took with them, how you were as a student in their class, different projects that you worked on that you know the teacher really liked, maybe essays that you wrote for the teacher or experiments that you guys did in class, and really remind them why you're such a great student. Also, make sure to note how they changed you as a student. What about their teaching helped you grow up? And that way they can write about how much you've grown as a student because they can write about how much you've grown within their class. Something that is so important but gets overlooked pretty often is sending a thank you letter to your recommendation letter writers. I recommend sending them 3 or 2 times, once after you submit all of your applications, and then again when you get your results back, and then when you finally make a decision. The reason I recommend doing this is, 1, it shows that you're grateful, which you should be because they put in a lot of work to write these letters for you and it's not easy, and so sometimes they can get a little disheartened if they don't hear back. But by writing to them and explaining to them what's happened and how much they've helped, it really builds a good relationship with you and the teacher, and it also just makes them really excited and feel like a part of your process. Let's talk about choosing schools, spreadsheet organization, and resources. When I came to this step, my college counselor just handed me a packet of schools with a bunch of names, and she highlighted a few out of the hundreds in there, which was kind of helpful, but I think the problem with this is that it narrowed my choices down without me even realizing it because I had only heavily considered what she had told me and I didn't really go out of my way to find other schools, which is why I recommend doing your own research and figuring out what school is really fit for you. When compiling a list of schools to apply to, what I did was create a spreadsheet, and then I had a few criteria that I made sure to include whenever I was doing my research. The criteria that I had was name, location, size, what type of application they had, so early application, early decision, regular decision, rolling decision, majors, the programs that they offered, the yearly cost with room and board, which is really important in the step that comes after this. And then I also had some pros, some cons. Because I'm a pre-med major, I also had one about research and opportunities. And then if you're unsure of what you want to study in college, I recommend looking into schools that give you a lot of flexibility. There's some schools where you apply to a school with a certain major and you're stuck with that major for the rest of college. If you don't know what to study, this can be really difficult. So what I recommend is searching for a school that has a ton of major and minor options. For USC, there are so many schools and so many majors and minors, and so I know that if I ever do get bored of neuroscience, which I don't think I will, but if I ever do, I'll be able to transfer to another school within USC, change my major, add some minors, and I think finding a school that works for you gives you a lot of flexibility to figure out what you want to do, and that way you're not locked into a major that you don't like. Let's talk about where to apply, application dates, and portfolio and additional materials. When you're deciding the number of schools that you want to apply to, there's a few criteria to keep in mind. What are the number of portals that you need to open? From there, you can figure out how many essays are due for each school. And then you need to make sure that you know the deadlines of these applications, which is so important. Some schools require that applications get sent in earlier so that you're eligible for scholarships. Or if you're interested in sending a portfolio of your work, whether it be for architecture, design, video, or even research, you have to make sure to look up the deadlines because those are usually earlier than the actual application deadline for the normal application. I made this mistake and I was not able to submit some pieces of art and some pieces of video work that I did because I had missed the deadline, and I don't want you guys to do that, so make sure you search those out. The most common deadlines for college applications are October 15th, November 1st is a huge one, there's also November 15th, December 1st, December 15th, and I think the final last big one is January 2nd, but there usually are a few other schools that have applications that end in like January 6th, but usually by the end of January, you're done with school applications. Once you know the deadlines of all of the schools that you want to apply to, then you can work backwards and start planning out how you're going to write your essays, and I'll go over this in a bit. Also, an important note, December 1st is really important for California schools. I think all Cal State schools are due by that day, as well as USC for their scholarship deadline, so make sure you pay attention to that and get that in on time. Now let's talk about the Common App, the extracurricular section, the FAFSA, the CSS, and your EFC. I want to talk a little bit about the application portals that you guys are going to be submitting your applications to. There's 3 main types. One is the coalition application, the second is the common application. This is as the name says, the most common. And then the third type is the school-specific portals. I know schools like MIT have their own portals that you have to go in, create a login, and apply through their website, as opposed to a sort of like common application, as the name says. Gosh. For the Common App and the Coalition application, you're going to have to write a really long essay. There is a bunch of resources out there that talk about this. I'm not going to go into this too much, but I'll leave them down in the description link if you're interested. And also I highly recommend checking them out so you guys are able to create the best common application story. Okay, we'll move on. Now we're going to talk about the extracurricular section, because this is one of the most important sections that you cannot skip out on, and I think sometimes gets overlooked. One of the best pieces of advice I heard about the extracurricular section was to write only the things that you could write a 500-word essay on. I think this is key because admission officers can easily see when you're just puffing up your application with activities that you actually don't care about, and you also want to make sure that the activities that you're putting in your extracurricular list matches what you're going to be saying in your essays, which again, we'll get to later. And when you have interviews, having a really good extracurricular list that actually reflects everything that you care about will be really good, so that when your interviewer writes notes about you and sends them in, it'll really give the school a whole and rounded idea of who you are as a person. Now, we have to talk about the FAFSA and the CSS. So please start this as early as possible. I think they open up in October. Just sit down with your family, hunker through it. You guys can get it done because you need to have the information that this provides. The FAFSA is used for almost every school. The CSS profile is mostly used for private institutions and I think a few public institutions. And the most important thing that they tell you is what your EFC, or your estimated family cost, is. This estimated family cost essentially tells the school how much you are able and how much they will probably expect you to pay for your education if you're going to attend any college. Now, coming back to the application portals, there is a button, and this is a very important button, that says, will you be applying for financial aid, yes or no? So if your EFC is higher than the cost of attending the school, including room and board, you need to click no to this button, because one, you're not going to get financial aid if your EFC is higher, and two, by saying that you're not applying for financial aid, you're basically saying that you're going to fund your whole education, and that is music to the admissions officer's ears. Because you want to know what? College is College is a business, okay? They want your money, they want to go invest it in oil industries and build up their wealth, because capitalism. Anyways, college is a business, and if you're able to pay for your education, as stupid as this sounds and as aggravating as it is, just tell them that you can, because it'll definitely increase your chances of getting into the school. Let's talk about essays, how to answer the questions, and the process to the best essay. Essay writing is a grueling process. It's hard, but I promise you it's not impossible. Let's break down the process of writing the essay into a few steps. 1, you want to create about 1, 2, or even 3 drafts until you get a first draft that's good enough. And then 2, you're gonna really want feedback on your essays. Make sure to choose someone that you know, but like you don't know too well, but it's like not awkward, that if you ask them for your help, you know. Basically, you want someone who's going to give you honest advice about your essay, and who also has enough distance from you that they don't know you too personally to get clouded when they're reading your essay and fill in the blanks where there are blanks. You want someone who's going to point out the problems in your essay so that way you can make it better, because at the end of the day, the admissions officer has no idea who you are. They only see what's going to be on the paper, and you want to make sure that whatever is written on the paper is as clear as possible. And also, the first time that you go through this process, it's going to be hard, it's going to take a long time, but once you're able to really nail and get those few key essays, such as like why this school, why this major, once you have that structure and you really like it, you'll be able to replicate that structure with other schools, but having that base is so important so that future you who's writing essays later will be a lot happier and a lot less stressed out. Now, you may ask, Shruti, what the heck do I write on these essays? There's no perfect answer to this, and honestly, as humans, an admissions officer is a human, and they're just gonna want to hear a story. And a good story has certain parts. It has a plot, it has characters, it has a beginning, it has an end, it has a climax. And so you really want to make sure that when you're writing your essays, you're telling a story about yourself. You're talking about things that are important to you in a way that connects to the human spirit. as cheesy as that sounds. Another important thing to keep in mind is that you know how everything that you do fits into your life. For example, I know how video, entrepreneurship, and medicine all fit into my life because I have already created this mental idea of what it means to me. But an admissions officer is not going to know that if I don't write that down on paper well. And honestly, my parents don't even know. So what I'm trying to tell you is that you understand how everything in your life fits together, but you need to make sure that when you're writing your essay, you're able to tell a cohesive story that explains to the admissions officer and compels them and convinces them why what you're doing goes together and how it really makes you unique. There's this really annoying thing that admissions officers always say, but it doesn't ever help. They're like, if you're not funny, don't try and make a joke. And I'm like, so did you want me to make a joke, but you don't want me to make a joke because I'm not funny? I know I'm not funny, but what my point is that I think they just want to have a more human emotion within the paper and within the essays that you guys are sending. And so as opposed to having a joke, because you know sometimes not everyone can pull it off, a good thing to include is an insecurity or a moment where you feel really vulnerable, and sort of pick out what are those insecurities, the basis of them, how you've been working towards improving them and getting over them. And I think showing that growth is really good to show the admissions officer that you are a person, you are a real human being, and you're capable and you have that metacognition to accept what you have inside of you and also work towards bettering yourself, which is always what people want to see in a person. Let's talk about organization, meeting deadlines, and maintaining sanity. I have thrown so much information at you, but here are some tools that you're going to need to organize everything that I've said. For all my essays, I created a spreadsheet in Google Drive that had the name of the school that I was applying to, the deadline of all of my application materials, as well as every single essay that they required of me. And having this whole spreadsheet, especially for visual learners, is really great to sort of map out the whole schedule, and then that way when you're writing your essays, you're going to have a really good idea of how they all fit together. And it's also just a way to make sure that everything is not crammed in your mind and you're not just overloading it with information. Also, don't forget you can reuse your essays as long as you have a really good structure. Once you have that structure, you can tailor it to every school specifically, so that way it makes it less work for you and also less stressful. To make sure that you're on time, set alarms, use Google Calendar, make sure that you're constantly reminded of the things that you have to do so that way you stay on top of it, and also make sure to submit your applications early. Common App sometimes goes through a bunch of different glitches, different portals can go through glitches, so if you submit your application a day earlier, you can troubleshoot all of that and still make sure all your materials are received on time. Lastly, to maintain your sanity, I'm begging you, please go to bed. I feel like a hypocrite saying this because I just didn't go to bed, but those are my mistakes and I don't want you to repeat them. Going to bed is so important so that you can go to sleep, relieve your stress, wake up with a fresh mind, and write the best essays you can. Your subconscious can easily be reflected in your writing, and you don't want that stressed, nervous side of you to come out. And also, none of my essays were ever written when I was sleep deprived at 3 a.m. I can promise you it's not going to be productive at that time. Go to bed, wake up in the morning, get a good breakfast, and then put your best effort forward when you're feeling your best. Okay, this is my favorite part. Let's talk about college interviews, how to prepare, and what to do after the interview. If your interviews are going to be online this year, make sure to have proper etiquette, so standing up straight, this is not a clear background, but pick a clear background. Make sure to have a formal wear, and also remember to look at the camera, not the screen. I have made this mistake in interviews for college clubs and I regret it. So just remember to look at the camera and not the screen. To prepare for your interview, I suggest making a list of all the things you want the interview to know about you before you leave that interview. That way, no matter the questions that are going to be thrown at you, you're going to make sure that everything that you want to say will somehow be said and incorporated. There are some really common questions that are almost always asked in interviews. I'll put them up on the screen now. I recommend prepping for these because I remember I showed up to my first interview. The interviewer had asked me these questions and I was so flustered She was really sweet. We got through it. I ended up getting in, so everything turned out well. But I do wish that I had prepared a little bit more, because that way I just would have been more confident and more myself, as opposed to just being flustered and trying to figure out a good answer. And also prepping for this answer beforehand will also give you some time to, you know, be a little bit introspective, understand yourself a little bit better, and have a really good time when you do eventually talk to your interviewer. Next, I recommend bringing your own set of interview questions for the interviewer. One, this just shows that you're really prepared, you're super interested in the school. And another thing, you can get firsthand information about the school that you probably can't get anywhere else, and you can also ask them how the school has helped them after they've left the college. So I'll put up some questions that I recommend asking just to help you guys, because this is a really great resource for you guys to learn more about the school, and when you're eventually coming to decision times, you can think back upon the interviews that you've had, which ones were really positive based on your interaction with the interviewer, help you gauge whether or not you want to eventually attend a school. But again, we'll get into this later. Make sure to stick out to the end of the video. After the interview, as soon as possible, send an email saying thank you for meeting with them. In the email, you can also talk about the things that you learned from them, talk about what you said, and really remind them of all the great things that you have told them and why you're so interested in the school. So that way, when the interviewer is going up and typing their notes to send to the school, they're going to have so many things fresh in their mind, and they're going to be able to tell the story that you want to be told to the college admissions board. And lastly, I really hope you guys don't overlook this, because I think it's so important, is sending an email to that interviewer after decisions come out. Regardless of whether you got in or not, the interviewers really want to know whether or not they made a difference, and also it's another connection that you guys have. Interviews are such a fun part of the process. I got into every school that I did an interview with, and so I definitely think if you guys follow these steps, though I can't guarantee it, I think you guys will be on the right path to success. Let's talk about the time between submitting applications and receiving results, as well as scholarships and honors programs. Okay, you guys, you have come to the part of the process where you have submitted everything, you've crushed those interviews, and now you have the time to relax. Please relax, take time for yourself. So much in this college process, we're just giving so much to our teachers, who we have to take tests for and write essays, and then we have to give so much to the colleges that we want to go to and write all of those essays and do those interviews, and then to our parents, and then to our friends, like just consoling them. And it's so hard to take time out of the day just for ourselves. And so I want to congratulate you guys. You made it through. Now take that time to reinvest in yourself, to dabble in the things that really make you happy. I remember throughout the college process, every time I thought of something that I wanted to do but I couldn't do because I had essays to write or tests to take, I would write it down all on a list, and then by the time I had finished submitting everything, I went back to that list and started checking things off. And it was really exciting, because it's kind of like finding a $20 bill in an old pair of jeans. You know you put it there, but then you rediscover it, and it's just so exciting. Also, don't take too much time to relax, because a great way to make use of this time is to apply to scholarships and also apply to honors programs. Honors programs are really great because they're usually smaller classes, better professors, better opportunities, and they can honestly make or break a decision to going to college. I know for me, getting into an honors program was the reason why I chose to go to USC, and for scholarships, this is the time to reuse all of those essays that you wrote for college into an application for a scholarship, and then you can make money at the same time, which again, in the future, you're going to thank yourself. Let's talk about decision results, accepted, deferral, waitlisted, rejected, and choosing the college best for you. Okay, so you have gotten all your decisions back. Congratulations, you are almost done with this cycle. I'm gonna be honest, I've gone through all of it: acceptance, deferral, waitlisted, rejected, and so we're gonna be talking about all of those parts right now. If you did get rejected from your dream school, I'm so sorry. I know what it feels like. I've been there. And it can feel like all the work that you've put in for so long has amounted to nothing, and no other school can possibly compare. And I was definitely in that mentality. I remember when I didn't get into my dream schools, I was like, there's no other option for me. There's no way I can go anywhere else. And it's a super bad mindset, and I can promise you that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And also remember, you applied to all the other schools because you did like them, you liked the opportunities that they offered, and so don't judge a book by its cover. I can promise you that there will be a lot of happy surprises in the places that you are accepted to. If you're still determined to attend that dream school, stick around, I got some tips for you. If you got deferred or waitlisted, I've been there, I get it. It's probably one of the worst situations because nothing seems really clear. I will say most people don't get off the deferred or waitlist, not speaking from experience or anything. I will say there are a few tactics that you can use. First, if you get deferred in the early application round, send an email as soon as possible. You can tell them about how much you're still interested in the school, you really like it. Another thing you can do is email professors and get in contact with them, establish some relationship, whether you're interested in their research, in the projects that they're doing. And then in the email that you send to the admissions officer for your school, while you're telling them how much you like the school, you can also tell them how you've been talking with this professor and really establishing a connection and you want to build that by attending the school. One last straw you can also use, or one cat in the hat, or one last hat to pull out, one last trick you can pull out of the hat is to say that you can afford to pay for your whole college tuition. Again, colleges really love to hear that students can pay for their tuition, and so you can throw that in there if you can, and that'll also be another way to incentivize them to accept you. And if they don't, that's okay. You don't really want anybody who doesn't want you. I know it sucks, but I can promise you that if they didn't want you, there are better things ahead. Now let's talk about paying for college, and if you got deferred or rejected from your dream school, make sure to listen up. College is expensive and sometimes you're going to be spending all that money just taking general education classes. So if you got into a school that you really love but you can't afford it, another option is community college. A lot of students that I know that I think are absolutely brilliant and some of the most smartest people have taken this option. What you can do is take all of your general education classes and complete all your credits in community college. You can also get a job and make money, and then you can transfer out back to that dream school, back out to another school, and that way you've made your money, so you're not going to be in a bunch of debt, you're not paying for general education classes, and that way you can save money and still get that sexy college degree. Okay, I'll stop. Finally, let's go over the criteria for choosing a college out of all of your final options. Here are a few criteria that I used when I was trying to decide where I wanted to go. So first, location, warm, cold, across the country, in-state. I knew that I wanted to go out of state, and I also knew that I wanted to be in a warm place because of that seasonal depression. I just really didn't want to get into it, so that was really important to me. And then the next thing is, how do you feel about the school? Are you excited? Are you bored? Are you intimidated? Intimidation is a little bit different. I recommend that if you are scared, you don't confront your fears, but also if people are just intimidating and you don't think you're gonna thrive in that atmosphere, then it's definitely not for you. I know I got into a few schools that were quote unquote more prestigious than USC, and I was really debating whether or not to attend them, even if I didn't like them just because of the prestige, but I can promise you that prestige at the end of the day will not win out over your own happiness. Your ability to thrive in an environment is more important and will honestly make you. The college does not make you, you make you. So another thing is to attend virtual events. This is a really great way to see what the professors are like, see what the opportunities there are, and actually engage with the people you would engage with at the school. And it's also just a way to get more information about college life in general, because I remember I attended an online event that had to do with pre-meds, and they talked about medical school, and based on what they talked about, that is why I chose to go to USC over some other schools. Even though I didn't think that I would ever end up at USC, I hadn't even considered that it would be a final option. I can say 100% that I'm so glad that I ended up there. The people there are just amazing. Everybody in my class is super kind. The teachers are just wonderful. I can go on and on about the amazing things that USC has to offer, but what I really want to say is that regardless of what the outcome is, I can promise you guys that you're going to go to the best place for you. You guys are going to thrive. I believe in you. I believe that the process works and that everything will turn out to be the way it is supposed to be.
Oh my God! Wow!
That is everything I have for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. If this was helpful at all, make sure to comment in the description box and give this video a thumbs up. And if you have any other questions, feel free to DM me on Instagram. This is a deviation from my normal content. I will mostly be uploading fashion, lifestyle, art, and beauty stuff. So if you're interested in that, also make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. It really helps me out and I really appreciate it. Next week, we will be back to our regular scheduled programming. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in my next video. Bye!